Hello there and welcome to Our Voices. The number of Black immigrants living in the U.S. has risen by 71% since 1980. That growth is driven in large part by African migration, which has more than doubled to over 1.6 million in 2016, according to the Pew Research Center. What is fueling this surge in African migrants? And is life really better or easier in the United States? Welcome to the conversation. I'm Ayan Bior, here along with my co-host Hadiza Kiari, Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick, and Ariane Itangishaka.
Thanks, Ayan. And today we are thrilled to have Joanna LeBlanc. She's a national security U.S. foreign affairs legal analyst with experience pertaining to Africans migrating to the United States. Welcome, Joanna.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Glad to have you on the show.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you.
Well, in April, U.S. President Donald Trump proposed new measures to crack down on people who travel to the United States on a visa and then illegally remain in the country after their visa expires. Now, this new policy will punish countries with high percentages of visa overstays and will mostly impact African nations. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara reports.
In 2018, the United States issued more than 9 million non-immigrant visas for visitors including tourists, students, and temporary workers from all over the world. About 2% remain longer than allowed in the country. The White House has ordered the Secretaries of State and Homeland Security to identify ways to reduce non-immigrant visa overstays within 3 months. Countries that do not reduce their high overstay rates could be penalized with tougher U.S. visa requirements. The policy is seen as an extension of Trump's push to reduce illegal immigration beyond unauthorized border crossings.
Congress must also act to fix, however, our horrible, obsolete, weak, pathetic immigration laws.
Under the plan, some countries could see tightened visa restrictions or even requirements that travelers pay admission bonds, which would be refunded when they leave. Government data show that in recent years, non-immigrant visa overstays exceed the number of border apprehensions, making up a significant portion of the approximately 11 million people living in the U.S. illegally. But some analysts question the administration's strategy of targeting countries with high overstay rates rather than countries with a high number of overstaying individuals.
Chad has a overstay rate, or a suspected overstay rate, about 20%. But that only translates to about 140 people in 2017. Whereas you have a country like the United Kingdom, which has more than 23,000 overstays suspected in 2017. So although the rate for the United Kingdom is very low, the numbers, 23,000, is much more than 140.
Djibouti, Solomon Islands, Eritrea, Chad, Liberia, and Somalia are among those with the highest overstay rates. It's unclear what steps the countries could take to convince travelers to return home. The administration has not responded to VOA questions about the motivations behind focusing on overstay rates, but immigration activists say the move unfairly targets African countries and could be challenged in the courts.
If the government decided that they were going to limit B1, B2 tourist business visas to people from African nations, you could bring a claim based on discrimination and say that this rule change or this administrative change is arbitrary and actually based in discrimination.
Analysts point out there may be another reason why the administration is focusing on countries with high overstay rates.
These countries are smaller countries, and that the administration may feel that it's easier to deal with them than trying to tackle a large country in which we have a lot of interactions with, like Canada or Mexico or the United Kingdom.
Canada, Mexico, and the United Kingdom are countries with the top 5 highest number of total overstays, as well as Brazil and Venezuela. The Trump administration says it considers tackling visa overstays a priority to protect American taxpayers. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
Now, if you look at all these proposed measures, Joanna, first of all, this American Dream and Promise Act of 2019, a very recent development. It was passed by the U.S. House of Representatives very recently. Does this act, does it protect Africans, and how does it square up with the kind of very tough measures and restrictions we're seeing by the Trump administration?
So, very good question. So as we know, the Trump administration rescinded the executive order to protect TPS holders and other beneficiaries, right? But in an effort to legalize those folks, the Congress in particular the House of Representatives, as you indicated, has passed the Dream and Promise Act of 2019, which is also called HR 6, and it protects immigrants from obviously Somalia, South Sudan, and obviously Haitian. So currently there are about, I believe, 325,000 TPS recipients and thousands of DACA recipients as well.
So please tell us, what does TPS stand for, and how does that, where do Africans fall?
Absolutely. So TPS stands for Temporary Protective Status. It is through an executive order that usually when countries are impacted by natural disasters, as a way for an effort to provide those individuals from those countries with some form of relief, the U.S. government, through an executive order, will say, you can come to the U.S. until your country condition stabilizes. Exactly. And as we see in most cases for folks, in particular from South Sudan, right, and in other nations, the countries have not improved. So they can't return home. So
and there's cases like Sudan where they have the temporary protected status, but then they slid back into unrest just recently.
Exactly. So as a way to ensure that those folks has a pathway to permanent residency and eventually the ability to apply for citizenship, the HR 6 was passed. Now that's the first stage. It was a hard fight. You have organizations such as Undocu Black, who represents Black immigrants, because when we hear immigration, the faces of Africans is not the first face you see. You see other folks from Latin America and Hispanics and such. So Docu Black has been pushing to ensure that immigrants from Africa are incorporated in the bills and are protected. So that's the first step, and the next step is the Senate has to pass it, and that's where the fight begins, because as we know, the Senate is ran by Republicans or the majority.
Right. So. Now, Joanna, you do remember when activists slammed President Trump's policy to bar people from certain countries like Libya, Syria, Somalia, and several others, from coming into the country, and people call it Islamophobic. So my question is, do you think this policy is Afrophobic?
So the Muslim ban, right? There is clear indication from the current administration, right? In terms of targeting certain folks from different countries because of their religious beliefs, right? So we can argue that, to a certain extent, it didn't come from a place of true concern. It came from a place of
othering.
Exactly. So, but when this argument was being debated about, the Muslim ban, was it going to pass or not? I tell folks, because it's eventually heard in the Supreme Court. Historically, the Supreme Court has always given deference to the executive branch when it comes to issues pertaining to immigration. Yes. So it was foreseeable that it would have been upheld, and that's what happened, unfortunately. Even though we have data, we have words from this administration clearly indicating that certain people were targeted because of their religious beliefs.
Okay. And also, we see right now there's a surge of Africans coming from the south, the southern countries like Mexico and the other parts of South America. The surge of Africans coming, in your view, what is fueling this surge of African coming to the U.S.? Is the better pastures over here?
That's a good question. And I tell people this all the time, right? If people are willing to risk their lives, right? They're walking miles. They're taking dangerous routes, right? Go days without eating, without sleeping, to make it to our shores. Something must be really wrong. Why would someone go through all of that to come to a country where they don't speak the language, they don't understand the culture, right? They don't understand the legal system, right? So there is a notion that things are bad home. It has to be better on this side. But to be frank with you, that's not always the reality, right? Because we know in the year 2019, if a child were to born in poverty in America, the child is more likely than ever in the history of this country to stay in poverty, right? But I think with those folks is, there's a slither of hope if you come to America, the notion of the American dream. If you work hard, you follow the law, you go to school, you do what you're supposed to do, perhaps you have a shot at the American dream.
And yet there's still conflicting narratives about the Africans or the immigrants in the United States. They say that we are freeloaders, but they also say that we are job stealers. Which one is it?
It's none of those things, obviously, right?
You cannot be a freeloading job stealer.
Right.
As we know, there is data to support the economic contribution of immigrants, and in particular African immigrants. And unfortunately, there's this narrative that The reason why certain people are not doing well in this country is because they are taking your job, right? When in reality, it's not them that is causing you to not have access to some of the basic necessities, or to not have access to better education or to better employment. The system is at fault. In America, we have a huge issue. It's not your brothers and sisters, it's not those immigrants who come here who are taking your jobs. If people will take all that energy and literally fight the system, we can see a much better approach. We can see some change. But unfortunately, some have been dedicated to redirect their attention to immigration and immigrants.
They want someone to blame.
They want someone to blame.
We are some of the most hardworking people in the world. Joanna LeBlanc, saying thank you so much for joining us today and getting this conversation started.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So we also want to get you talking on social media. Catch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Our handle is @VOA Our Voices. We're also on WhatsApp. That number is on your screen.
Coming up, President Donald Trump wants to end merit-based immigration and green card lottery, also known as the diversity immigrant visa. That heated debate when we come back. We'll be right back.
On Our Voices, we're talking about the news and issues you're talking about.
Sharing stories of development and growth across Africa, around the world, and in our lives.
Topics that inform, empower,
and change the rules.
It's time for Our Voices with me, Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick,
and Hadiza Kiari,
and Ayan Bior,
and Orion Itangi Shaka.
Join us on Facebook at VOA Our Voices.
It's time for Our Voices.
You're with Our Voices. Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump launched his immigration plan in May, which includes stopping the diversity immigrant visa, also known as green card lottery, drastically reducing the number of family sponsorship visas and moving towards a merit-based system. Democrats have rejected the plan since it does not address the fate of nearly 700,000 dreamers, individuals brought in the country illegally as children. Once again, Patsy with the Kuswara has this story.
30% of college-educated workers in science and engineering in the U.S. are foreign-born, according to the National Science Board. President Donald Trump wants more of these highly skilled immigrants.
A new legal immigration system that protects American wages, promotes American values, and attracts the best and brightest from all around the world.
The U.S. grants 1.1 million permanent legal residence visas, also known as green cards, each year. The majority are given to individuals with family ties to U.S. citizens rather than based on skills or employment. Trump wants to cut the number of family-sponsored visas and increase those he calls merit-based. He wants to reduce humanitarian-based visas, such as for asylum seekers and refugees, by half, and stop the diversity visa program, the green card lottery.
Random selection is contrary to American values.
Trump calls the new proposal the Build America visa. It's determined by points including age, English proficiency, education, offer of employment or promise of investment, and passing a test on American history and government. Democrats have rejected Trump's merit-based plan.
Are they saying family is without merit? Are they saying most of the people who have ever come to the United States in the history of our country are without merit because they don't have an engineering degree?
Also because it does not address DACA recipients, the 700,000 dreamers, individuals who were brought to the U.S. illegally as children, and the millions of undocumented immigrants already here.
This is not something that has any path to becoming a law. And he kind of intimated that at the end of his speech when he said, you know, if this isn't enacted by Congress, then we'll enact it once we regain the presidency and the House. I think we already saw 2 years with this president and unified Republican Congress, and he still didn't get anything done on immigration. So I don't think that this proposal has any chance.
Nor does it address the shortage of workers for jobs that are not highly skilled.
The industries that are complaining about worker shortages are specifically looking for immigrants, whether it's construction or agriculture or meatpacking. There is a lot of demand in those particular areas, and a high-skilled immigration system, although important, wouldn't address our other needs, which is on the lower skill level.
Trump also still insists on a border wall and wants to create a trust fund from border crossing fees to help pay for it. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
You know, the reality is that some of the best and brightest in this world don't have degrees because they come from countries where they don't have the opportunity to get their degrees. They come from countries where they would love to work, but jobs just are not available. And that's why they look to the United States. They come with this idea of the American dream where they can build their futures, raise their kids. And we see it reflected in the numbers. African immigrants are some of the most educated immigrants, group of immigrants here in the United States. So when I see stories like this, I think, you know, we should be recruiting more Africans to come here because we have proven time and time again that we can give back to the United States. We can give back to our host communities.
And that's true. And that's true because that actually makes me want to address the Africans that are educated. You know, the Africans that come here, whether they come through a lottery system, whether they come through any other system, those Africans that are educated and have work experience, they should be mindful on the fact that when they come here looking for green pastures, they might not have the jobs that they want or the societal status that they already have, because they could be an economist, they could be a college professor, but they may end up working in a supermarket. They may end up becoming cab driver, taxi drivers.
Nothing about coming here is easy.
And that, yeah, exactly. And so their education, my worry is that their education doesn't translate exactly automatically in the U.S. system because they have to go through different private organizations to kind of get accreditation of their degrees.
And
if you remember the Department of Education's website, you can even go there and you see it says that the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. NEI do not evaluate foreign degrees and qualifications. So you basically have to find a way to make life with your degrees and experience that might not even be worth it.
And we all have family members whose degrees are rendered useless once they come here to the U.S. One of my family members has a master's in accounting that he was not able to use, and so he worked in a gas station, and that was very traumatic for him to have a man who's supposed to be the provider of his house who had to work minimum wage at a gas station to provide, whereas if he was back home, he could use his accounting degree.
That's exactly right.
But you know, I had a chance to speak to Bella Yahuma. She's a Swahili language interpreter here in Maryland, and she spoke about her experience with Africans who are in the process of migrating to the United States and those who are seeking asylums. Let's hear what she had to say.
I can say with complete confidence and conviction that when asylees and refugees come to this country, they're not coming because they want an easy way out. They're coming because they have suffered significant turmoil, hardships, torture, persecution, and they're looking for a safe haven within the borders of America. America, a country that is great and has been known to welcome immigrants. This country was built by immigrants. That's what the forefathers saw, and that's how they built this nation.
And you know what? I totally agree with Bella. I mean, we have to keep in mind that these guys are not coming in as criminals or gang members. You know, they're not coming here because they want to take advantage of the system. They have real issues. A lot of them fled their countries due to hardships. Right, due to hardships. It could be oppression or even poverty. But for some, like myself, it's not necessarily hardship. I mean, I was privileged enough to come on a lottery-based visa. But regardless of how you get here, it is not that easy. It's not that simple. It costs a lot of money. Most things that, you know, because you have a green card, it's automatic, it's easy. I can tell you that it is not. I was totally surprised, you know. You still have to deal with a lot of fees. I mean, I remember it cost me more than $3,000 to just get here. You have to think about the visa fees. Right, you have to think about the visa, the medical as well. You know, there's just so many fees associated to it. And then you have to get there and prove to them that you're not coming here to be a burden on the country. In my situation, I already had I've been accepted into university, which I had paid, partially paid for it. So those were the things that helped me. It was not automatic.
Well, I think Africans and immigrants in general take that American saying by John F. Kennedy, the former president, very seriously. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. You have to prove that you are an asset to the United States.
Right.
And I think those of us who are immigrants and who have American-born children growing up, we need to keep telling them the stories of our hardships and our challenges and those of others, especially our children who have roots on the continent.
Absolutely.
Because I think when people start forgetting where they come from, it is very easy to lack sympathy and to be part of the decision-making pools where they do not take, they don't think about that into consideration and forget that almost everyone in this country, except Native Americans, are the descendants of immigrants and refugees. But I think something that a real calculation that many families are going to have to take into account when it comes to family-sponsored visas is about family members who are already here on green cards. I mean, there isn't a lot of clarity on that, and even for my family, that's something we're going to have to consider for a direct relative who is here. What happens when that visa, that green card expires? Does the restriction include those people who are already here?
People who we really need for them to be here.
I really needed my mother to be here because
So
I found myself
my
first job in the United States. It didn't pay well, and I realized that I was pregnant and I had to think about daycare for a second child. I could not afford a daycare, and we were a two-income household. I could not afford daycare for my child. I would have had to work so that my child could be in daycare so that I could work. Whereas back in South Africa, in Cape Town, I would have had a family network, yes, but I would also have been able to afford, as a professional, I would have been able to afford childcare. Labor is much cheaper.
Yeah.
You can afford to have a nanny. You can afford to have a night nurse. Those things are not, I just found that there was very little in the way to help me as a working mother and for us as a working family to help create that support. And I had to bring my mother here. But now, what happens next?
You know, I worry about the new visa application process. I mean, right now, it means that you'd have to submit all of your social media handles as well as 5 years of emails and phone numbers. That's totally scary.
Deep.
It is deep and
American
scary.
dream does not come cheap.
No, not at all. We have to take a break now, but coming up, we introduce you to an advocate who is trying to elevate and empower immigrants in America.
But first, I recently traveled to New York, which is considered by many as the gateway for immigrants from all over the world to America. So while I was recently in Manhattan, I spoke to African immigrants on their experiences here in the United States. Here's what they had to say. Take a listen, and we'll be right back.
I came to go to school and work, but when I came here, it wasn't what I thought it was. That's not what it be when I got over here. Here you gotta work hard and pay bill, and even up to now, I used to get my way through the school because I couldn't pay for it. I don't qualify for financial aid because of the document.
Because of the document, you don't have papers in America. So what would you advise Africans on the continent that are trying so hard to make it here and come here? Should they stay? Should they go? What should they do?
I would advise all of them, millions of them. You're good where you are, my brothers and sisters. Coming over to America, they free people, free us from the slave, but it's still a slave mentality. Ain't not other American, they were telling you, come for America, the dream is bull. So when you're in your own country, think of where you could start and build Africa. This is what, right now, I'm just finding my way to come home.
I would say to just stay focused on your dreams. There's so much going on in the city in New York, and you can easily be distracted. But if you come here with a focus and you just focus on that dream, it's possible.
America is harder than what I thought. It's very hard. It's very hard to adapt to the language, the culture. If you have opportunity in Africa and you can make it there, stay there, because we have to build our continent. Now we have to stop waiting for people to help us build our continent. We have to do it. But if you have no opportunity in Africa, just come here and try to figure it out. But you have to keep in mind that it's gonna be hard.
Welcome back to Our Voices. Today we are highlighting an advocate who is trying to make it easy for African immigrants to come to America.
We'd like to introduce you to Joe Neguse. He is a freshman U.S. lawmaker from Colorado who introduced a bill at the end of May that would protect dreamers from deportation by granting them 10 years of legal resident status if they meet certain requirements. Although the American Dream and Promise Act of 2019 finally passed in the U.S. House of Representatives in early June, it is unlikely to ever pass in the Senate and become law. However, Neguse, the son of Eritrean refugees who came to the U.S. nearly 40 years ago, says he refuses to see the proposed legislation as a failure, but rather defining immigration as an integral part to the fabric of America.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to offer a quote. And the quote is as follows: "It is bold men and women yearning for freedom and opportunity who leave their homelands and come to a new country to start their lives over. They believe in the American dream, and over they make it come true for themselves, for their children, and for others. They give more than they receive. They labor and succeed. And often they are entrepreneurs, but their greatest contribution is more than economic, because they understand in a special way how glorious it is to be an American." That quote, that's not my words. Those are the words of President Ronald Reagan. They were delivered by President Ronald Reagan in 1980, the same year my parents came to the United States. Let's pass the H.R. 6 today, and let's treat every person in our country who has struggled and is just as American as you and I are. Let's treat them with the respect that they deserve. Vote no on this motion to recommit, and let's pass H.R. 6 today. I yield back.
Who do you think deserves a shout out? Use the hashtag VOA Our Voices and tell us who you think is a woman to watch.
And be sure to watch Our Voices on the VOA website, where you can find the world's top news stories.
And we leave you with a quote from U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar, who used her voice to say, "We say this is a land of immigrants, and we forget that this was a land that belonged to people. And those of us who are new immigrants and those of us who come from generations of immigrants have to realize we are not that much different from one another."
And that's our final word for this week. A special thank you to Joanna LeBlanc for joining us today as well. On behalf of the Voice of America and along with my colleagues, thanks for tuning into Our Voices. Good day.